Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Marchuk. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. In this episode, I'll be chatting with Alexis Gauba, co-founder of Raindrop.ai, and we'll be chatting about some ways to keep track of what's going on inside of all that AI that's going into every organization at this point in time, as well as some of the AI agents that are being let loose on organizations. So welcome, Alexis.
Thank you. Thank you. Super excited to be here.
I'm glad that you're here too. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, totally. So I'm one of the co-founders of Raindrop. Raindrop is Sentry for AI products. So we basically detect issues in AI products and then send you a notification so you can understand what's going wrong and fix it. We started Raindrop about a year and a half ago. So it's myself and two co-founders. We went through YC in the W24 batch, and we've been building ever since.
Gotcha. So when we start talking about generative AI and whatnot, we see more and more firms leveraging Gen AI with their customer service interactions, whether that's just automated through chatbots or through augmented human interactions that are using generative AI. What are some of the risks that you've been seeing as organizations run into that are relying on this Gen AI too much?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really good question. And a lot of people are rolling out AI products without really thinking about how they're going to improve them. And so I think the problem isn't rolling out the AI products, but it's not having a clear plan for how you develop and then improve the products. So we've seen people run into all sorts of issues. So, for example, Air Canada actually got sued because one of their customer service AI representatives said to a customer that they would get a refund. A human saw that later and was like, wait, no refund. And then the customer was like, this is crazy. Like, I was literally promised a refund. And so the consequences can be dire. We've also seen, Figma rolled out their AI design product last year. They have their config conference coming up next week. Really excited to see what they're going to launch. But last year, they created an AI design product. Then users started using it. It started copying Apple's designs. And then they completely rolled back the product and never relaunched it. So, hopefully we're going to get a relaunch this week. But the consequences can be really, really crazy if you don't have the proper guardrails to actually monitor these products in production and stop these things from happening as soon as you become aware of them.
Gotcha. So this is kind of like one of the governance guardrails that you might put in place as part of a broader governance framework. Is that how I'm hearing it?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple of things. So I think usually when people start developing AI products, a good thing to do is have like a set of evals. So ways that you think people might use the product, sample data that represents, what users might use the product for, and you test your prompts and pipelines against those evals to make sure they're doing a good job and they're not falling into any of the traps. But when these prompts and pipelines actually end up in production, we all know that users use products in ways that you never would have expected. And so what you want to do is be able to catch any issues that are popping up early before people take to Twitter and make a whole big deal out of everything. You want to be catching those first incidences, immediately pushing fixes and solving the problem. So let's take the Figma example. If they were able to see that users were generating outputs that went against basically their terms, and they were able to capture that early, they might have been able to push a fix. That meant that people wouldn't blow it up on Twitter, which meant they wouldn't have to roll back their product because they would have been able to solve issues quickly, maybe even in their beta phase. And so, yeah, that's kind of the process that we've seen good AI companies take. Have this set of evals, start testing with a beta cohort early, and make sure you have production monitoring so you can catch issues before they become a storm.
Gotcha. So not all organizations are AI first organizations. So you think about like insurance companies and banks and others that have been more traditional type of industries that are now adopting generative AI or AI agents. How could this help them?
Yeah, totally. So I think especially for, companies in things like insurance and banking, it's really, really critical that you're getting all of the information right. Like customers are coming for their, very important services, and you don't want to be giving them the wrong information. And so some things that you can actually track with monitoring systems are like, did the assistant forget something the customer had already said? So, if the customer gave details about their insurance situation and the assistant forgot those details, the customer would be getting the wrong response. So you want a system that can detect things like that so you can make sure that your customer is getting accurate information. So that's like, one example of the types of guardrails that those companies could put in place with a monitoring system.
Gotcha. So it sounds like, we've all seen Gen AI be these giant black boxes where you throw a prompt in, you shake it up, and out comes a response, right? So how can organizations see generative AI as less of a black box and something a little more um, predictable?
Totally. It's a really good question. I think one of the biggest things is getting an intuition for the data. So, what your customers are actually asking and what the model is actually responding. Being able to look at production data is really, really key here, especially when you're developing these products. So, you want to look at, okay, what did the customer say? What did the AI output? And then you want to be able to test prompt changes against those different, inputs and see how those outputs change. And then you start to build an intuition for, okay, how does the model respond when I make these tweaks? How does it respond when I make other tweaks? And you have start to understand how things work. And then when you put things in production, you want to be able to see, okay, how does it change in production from what I expected in my testing? How can I spot those discrepancies and go ahead and continue to make changes? So it's very iterative, and you need to really be on the ball, need to be moving fast, and need to be having kind of your source of truth that you can test against, so you understand when things are deviating in a certain direction, how do you get it back to the happy path that you expect?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like there's a lot more human intervention than perhaps some organizations are expecting because they're expecting these very, very capable LLMs to sort of take the ball and run with it, right?
Yeah, totally. And the LLMs are incredibly smart and only getting smarter. But when it comes to your specific use case, you have to kind of mold and shape them. They're made to, be these general purpose things, these representations of the whole internet. And so they're going to go off into these little corners that you might not expect. And so you want to give them the constraints to make them do really, really well at your specific use case. And that's what you want to be benchmarking against.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, um, as organizations are taking this whole Gen AI component and LLMs, they're starting to slide into this agentic AI, allowing AI agents to be able to do things as they go from maybe a back end perspective. So it may not even be so much customer facing as it is taking data that's generated through customer interactions or just through normal transactionary kind of processes. So, how can organizations build a management platform to be able to monitor what's going on with these agents without handcuffing their performance or their interactivity?
Yeah, absolutely. And so with all these agents, there's a lot of different steps that they're taking. They'll look at some initial set of data. They'll make usually a decision on what kind of tool to call. Maybe that's a tool to put it through like a Python script or go fetch some data from the internet. So you want to be able to see, okay, what tool did the agent choose? What was its reasoning for choosing that tool? How did the tool call go? You want to be able to see every single step of this process. And very importantly, the agent's reasoning for every single step of this process. And so what you want is basically called a trace. So a trace shows you all of these different steps of the process. And as long as you're logging the reasoning, you'll be able to see that as well. And logging the reasoning gives you this really, really great insight into how the model is thinking about things. So you might be able to see, oh, it made this misconception in this example that made it choose the wrong tool. Let me go adjust my initial prompt to be clearer so it doesn't have that misconception anymore. Or let me give it an example of this kind of scenario so it knows how to address it. And so I think that's the really, really critical thing. And the thing people miss sometimes is logging the reasoning in addition to what steps it took, because you really need both to be able to make the right changes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I keep thinking of the types of tools you're mentioning, the agents selecting tools for specific things. And I think for any of these type of workflows, perhaps even looking at the workflow itself is, should this be going through an AI agent to start with, right? Maybe there are other tools that are more deterministic that would allow you to get the output without necessarily having to tease out the AI to give you the same results that a deterministic model might do, with probably a lot less cost in terms of the overhead and the calls.
That's a really good point. I think a company that does that really well is Clay.com. They're one of our customers, and they have this AI agent called a Claygent, which is like a web scraping AI agent that can take all of these actions. But they also have these integrations into, kind of your normal GTM platforms. And they help customers choose when it's right to go use, the tried and true integration versus the Claygent to be able to get the right results. And, they're very deliberate about that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. because AI is this cool new thing, this desire to try it out. But you want to make sure it's the right tool for the job.
Exactly, exactly. So, as you've been working with other organizations that have adopted so kind of this new view into what's going on in their AI world, what are some of the biggest issues that you've seen with organizations who've gone forward to adopt Gen AI and AI agents, leveraging this kind of viewpoint in this century into their systems?
Yeah, totally. And I think that we've seen a lot of things. Like there's a lot of different types of AI products, and different types of AI products run into different issues. So we can kind of break them down into a couple categories. So one category is almost like the personal assistant or like friend applications. So the personal AIs that you talk to about your life. And they talk back to you. So some really awesome companies that are building in this area are like Tollins or New Computer, and there, it's really, really important that the assistant has the right tone because you want it to be a friend. It's important that it remembers every single detail about the user, just like a friend would. So you're always recreating a friend, and you want it to be just like a human friend. And so it's really, really critical to understand. Okay, when is the assistant forgetting something? When is it speaking in the wrong tone? When is it failing at a task that the user asked for? So sometimes the user will be like, "Hey, like, I have this essay. Can you help me like edit it and then print it out for me?" And the AI will be like, "Yeah, of course. Like the printout will be on your desk tomorrow." Then the user comes back and is like, "Wait, there's no printout. You didn't even email me anything." And it's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And so just helping it understand like its capabilities. Or if the user's like, "I already told you about my best friend." Um, and and then, their AI friend is like, "Oh my God, I forgot." But your real friend would never forget about your other friends. So that's kind of one class of apps. There's obviously like the code generation apps. So where users are like typing in a prompt and it'll generate a website or generate some code. The common issues that these kinds of apps face are one is like laziness. So, the coding agent, instead of outputting the whole code file, will output part of it and then leave comments for the rest of it. And the user's like, "What's going on? Like, I asked you to do this for me." So that's a really common one. Or another common one is like it'll just like fail at its task. It'll, write code that doesn't compile. It'll write code that returns issues. And they want to be able to catch these things and understand, okay, like are there certain like languages or frameworks where it gets more tripped up than others, and they know where to go deep dive to make the products better. So those are like two different kinds of apps, different examples. We talked about kind of the agents earlier. A big, issue there is essentially like refusals. So it'll go try to scrape something on the web. It won't be able to. You want to understand what's having trouble scraping on the web so that you can come back and fix those instances.
So, do you foresee this type of framework being leveraged within sort of the mixture of agents kind of approach, where you have a managerial agent who can get access to this kind of review of the, so I guess, subordinate agents who are actually out there doing the work? Does that seem like a direction you're headed?
So that's not a direction that we're necessarily thinking about internally right now. We have like a set of different like models and frameworks that go and do this issue detection. But it's a really interesting concept. And I think something that could be really useful for our customers or people building AI products. It's, a good way to figure out, okay, can I have this really smart model and go ahead and make decisions based on the outputs of some models that aren't as smart? Because the really smart models cost a lot more. You can have kind of your smaller model that's your workhorse model that goes and does a lot of different things. And then your manager model that's a lot smarter, choosing almost like the right answer, save costs, but get better performance.
Gotcha. So, where do you see this going as you look out into your crystal ball, say into the next 6 months, then maybe the next year? Because things change so darn quickly. How do you see this kind of technology filtering its way into the mainstream?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's been so crazy to just see all the progress to date, and it feels like it's only growing exponentially. These models are getting more and more intelligent and cheaper. And as smarter models get even cheaper, it just opens a whole new set of use cases that just weren't even possible before. And so I think we're going to just keep seeing things that we don't expect, which is why it becomes really, really important to just be able to pull out unknown unknowns. I think another big thing that we're going to continue to see is like domain specific applications. So we have, these general purpose LLMs, this ChatGPT that everybody talks to, but people get a ton of value out of, say, something like Cursor, which is like the perfect form factor for developing applications, or Clay, which is like a really good agent for scraping the web and finding these sales leads. So I think we're going to continue to see these like domain specific applications that are using prompting, that are using these agent pipelines to mold these models into, the best version they can be for a specific use case.
Gotcha. And last question is, what are you looking forward to most as the next year unfolds?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. I think it's, everything feels moving really fast and really crazy. I'm almost just like looking forward to the surprise of it all, and seeing what's going to happen. But it's always really, really fun to try out these new apps that start to emerge. And I think we're going to start to see like more and more people adopting best practices for building these apps. I think we're so early in people building AI applications. A lot of people don't have robust evals yet or monitoring, and then their users get really frustrated. And so I think we're going to start to see things like that become table stakes the way they are in building normal applications. You wouldn't ship a normal product without tests, and you wouldn't ship a normal product without like a Datadog or a Sentry. And I think we'll start to see that become the standard in AI products as well, which should hopefully create much better experiences for users.
And I would imagine that would allow the organizations who are putting these things out to feel like they're making the right choices with not only the tools that they're making, but also the direction they're headed with adopting more and more generative AI within their both customer service and back end systems.
Totally. Yeah. Hopefully it'll give them a lot more confidence to like actually push these systems out to production.
That makes sense. Well, Alexis, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate our discussion, and best of wishes to you as you're rolling out your product to more and more organizations.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Super fun.